Welcome back for Keeper of the Lost Cities and Nightfall, chapters 26 and 27. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a chapter. This is chapter 26. Ouch, Dex mumbled. You don't have to look that horrified. I'm not horrified, Sophie promised, barely stopping herself from dropping the crushed cuffs. How on earth was she supposed to explain this? There had been times when Dex had made her wonder if maybe... But she'd always shrugged it off or pretended not to notice. And lately, he'd been way less pouty and pushy, which had been a relief because Dex was sweet and hilarious and brilliant and a million other awesome things. But he was just a friend. Relax, Dex told her. Like I said, the cuffs are only for camouflage. Remember when I told you I'd build a gadget to block your enhancing? I figured that might be a good thing for you to have in Ravagog, in case Dimitar makes you take off your gloves. He clicked a hidden latch on one of the snaps, flipping back to show a ton of intricate circuitry. See, I designed these microtransmitters to put a force field around your hands so that if anything is touching your skin, it isn't actually making contact. And it's a non-reactive force field, so you won't zap anyone if you touch them. But we should probably test it, just to make sure everything's working. Sophie peeled off her gloves in a daze and snapped on the cuffs, which fit snug, resting right where her wrists ended and her hands began. They aren't too tight, right? He asked, tugging on the fabric. I didn't want them sliding down your arm, in case that weakened the force field, but I don't want them cutting off your circulation either. And I went with snaps, because you can pull them on and off faster than a button or a clasp. She tried to focus on the practical points he was making, which truly did make a lot of sense. But all she could think about was how anyone who saw her wearing them would assume that she and Dex were, well, something they weren't. Ready to test them? He asked. When she nodded, he grabbed both of her hands, and Sophie pressed her fingertips against his skin, half hoping she'd feel the familiar warm tingle and be able to call the whole thing a fail. But Dex pumped his fist. Woo! I don't feel anything. Why did he have to be such a talented technopath? He held on a few seconds longer, then checked the snaps again. Everything looks okay, but it's probably a good idea to wear the gloves tomorrow too, since I threw all this together a couple of hours ago and there might still be some glitches. I'll make something more permanent now that I know the concept works. Oh! Sophie let loose a breath she hadn't noticed she was holding. So these are only temporary? She could live with temporary. Maybe she could even turn them inside out in the meantime. And you'll make the permanent ones with normal bracelets, right? She asked. Why? They'd be way more noticeable. Crush cuffs are one of the only things people never take off. They also never take off nexuses, Sophie reminded him. Wasn't that what you said you'd use to make these? That was the plan, but nexuses have complicated clasps, and even when I simplified the latches as much as I could, they were still way harder to take off than these. Isn't it smarter to have something you can snap off super quick in case you need to enhance someone in a hurry, and put back on really easily when you're done? Unfortunately, he had a point. Well, what if we went with a plain cloth bracelet, then? She asked. I don't think anyone makes those. Cloth bracelets are always crush cuffs, and if they don't have names on them, it'll look super weird. She shrugged. I have brown eyes and grow up with humans. Everyone expects me to be weird. Right, but I thought you also didn't want to have people asking questions about your hands. Isn't that why you're dressing all fancy now? So the gloves won't stand out? She really wished he'd stop making such well-reasoned arguments. It meant she only had one option left, and it was the extra awkward one. She stared at her wrist, tracing her fingers over the giant silver letters, which felt like they were somehow getting bigger. If people see me wearing these, won't they think we're... She couldn't make herself say it. He shrugged. I guess some might think I'm your hopeful... But that's just a matchmaking thing. People give out the cuffs before they register, like they're trying to tell the matchmakers, pair me with them. It's not like the matchmakers listen. All they care about are genetics and abilities. Dex had admitted once that he wasn't sure if he'd be registering for the match, or if he'd refuse to protest the way they'd treated his parents. And Sophie honestly hadn't decided if she'd be doing it either. She wasn't thrilled with the idea of being told who she was allowed to love. It's just people's way of feeling like they have a little control over their lists, even though they don't, Dex added. The cuffs don't actually mean anything. And yet Fitz hadn't worn any of the cuffs he'd been given as midterm gifts. And Bianna didn't wear any, or Keith, or Tamalyn, or Jency. Even Morella, with all of her flirtiness, didn't have a pair. It's going to start a bunch of rumors, Dex, she said carefully. So? They already say all kinds of things about both of us. Right. But she grasped for something, anything that would be gentler than we're not hopefuls, feeling her heart lighten when she realized there was one last desperate protest. We're cousins, she finished. Dex blinked, and he cracked up. That's what's bothering you? We're not actually cousins, Sophie. Everyone knows you're adopted. I know, but technically your mom is my mom's sister. Won't that freak people out? Nah, we're not genetically related. And honestly, do you ever think of me as cousin Dex? No, she begrudgingly admitted. But you're way overthinking this, he told her. Did you freak out this much when Fitz handed you rings with his initials on them? Those are a cognate thing. Maybe, but not all cognates have them. And I've heard people gossip about you guys because of them. Really? That definitely did not help her queasiness. So if you're fine with that, Dex continued. Why? I never said I was, Sophie interrupted. Okay, but if I ordered new crush cuffs with Fitz's name on them and used them for the next batch, it would still feel super weird, Sophie finished. And it would, for different reasons, but he didn't need to know that. Would it feel weird if Fitz was the one to give them to you, Dex pressed? She hated herself for blushing at the thought. We're not talking about hypotheticals. We're talking about this. She pointed to the names on her cuffs again, which seriously had to be getting bigger. Astronauts could probably read them from space. Is it really so bad to have people think that you want the option of dating me? Dex asked without looking at her. That's all a hopeful really means. It's just a possibility. That's it. When he put it that way, it didn't sound as scary. But giving him the answer he needed still felt like agreeing to a whole lot more. She stared at the intricate embroidery, trying to think of anything she could say to dig her way out of this mess, but her mind kept circling back to something Dex had already said. Something she probably shouldn't keep poking at, but she had to know. So, crush cuffs have to be ordered in advance. Yeah, it takes a few days for them to customize the names. Why? Because he'd said he threw the gadgets together for her that day. Somehow, Dex managed to pale and flush. I've been planning to use crush cuffs for this for a while. And I put my name because I thought it'd be funny. That's it. She really wanted to believe him. It would have been so much easier if she could, but he was too fidgety, and he wouldn't look at her. And she could see the sweat trickling down his forehead as he backed a few steps away. Dex, she said gently, It's fine, okay? He pulled so hard at the bottom button on his jerkin that it popped off in his hand. Just drop it. She wished she could. Every alarm siren in her head was screaming, danger, danger, danger. But deep down she could feel this time that it was different. They'd torn something open, exposed something raw and deep. And if she tried to pretend they hadn't, let him walk out of this room without patching it up, their friendship would never be the same. And Dex was worth fighting for. Worth wading neck deep into a terrifying, embarrassing muck if it gave her a shot at saving what really mattered. She just didn't know how. Words would only hurt, but what else was there? Maybe it's time for a trust exercise, she decided after what felt like an eternity. I'm not a telepath, he mumbled miserably. No, Sophie said, but you're my best friend, and this is important. Nerves tangled in her throat as an idea took shape. One of those all-in kinds of plans that could far too easily backfire into a nightmare of unparalleled proportions. I think, she said slowly, there's a really easy way to settle this. Once and for all. Settle what? Dex asked. That's where the trust comes in, she said. Close your eyes. Why? She put her hands on her hips, tapping one foot until he obeyed. Fine, my eyes are closed now. Happy? Terrified would have been a better description. But one final look at the crushed cuffs had Sophie taking a slow step forward. Then another. She could do this. She just had to think of it as an experiment. And maybe she was a little curious. What are you doing? Dex asked as she closed the last of the distance between them. Just testing something. She found herself marveling again at how much taller he was than the boy she'd first met, and took one deep breath for courage, then another to steady her nerves. When she couldn't stall any longer, she tilted up on her toes and leaned in, lingering a hair's breadth away, so he'd have the option of pushing her back if he wanted. He didn't, so she closed her eyes and pressed her lips against his. Chapter 27. It wasn't a movie-worthy kiss, that was for sure. Their noses bumped, Sophie's lips felt too dry, and Dex started out with a startled squeak. Then, for one truly horrifying moment, it almost felt like he wasn't going to kiss her back. But he did kiss her back. And that made it so much worse. He reached for her face, but his fingers somehow ended up tangled in her hair, and his knees crashed into hers, nearly knocking them both over. The whole thing couldn't have lasted more than 5 seconds, but all Sophie could think was, is it over yet? And then it was. And they stood there, staring at each other. And it was so awkward. Dex's eyes were stretched wide, and his breathing was way too fast, and Sophie couldn't decide if she wanted to cry or burst into nervous giggles. She settled for covering her mouth with her hand. You kissed me, Dex eventually whispered. All she could do was nod. He reached for his lips, brushing his fingers across them. I always imagined it different than that. Different how? He stumbled over to her bed and sank onto the edge. I don't know. Seconds crawled by. Don't hate me, he mumbled. But didn't it feel weird? Relief flared, even as the words gave Sophie's pride a good hard smack. I'm not saying it was bad, he added quickly. It's just... There was no spark. Sophie finished for him. Yeah. His relief faded to a wince. Does that mean I'm a terrible kisser? I don't think it's you. Well, it wasn't you. The conviction in his voice made her blush. He brushed his fingers across his lips again, staring blankly at the wall. I just couldn't stop thinking the whole time, you know? I kept worrying my breath was bad or trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with my hands. And I mean, I always knew it'd be awkward at first. But I'd figured at some point all of that would drop away and I'd just sort of feel. I think that's how it should be. She forced her shaky legs to move close enough to sit beside him, but not too close. Space was good right now. They needed a cushion of air to hold all the angst swirling between them. I think it's us, she added gently. I think neither of us could relax because deep down we know we're better as friends. His eyes shifted to the dark sky outside her windows. That's why you did it, huh? You already knew you didn't like me that way? It's more than just me, Dex. Otherwise, you would have felt something during the kiss. But I've liked you for years. His face turned redder than she'd ever seen it when he realized what he'd just admitted. Ugh, could this get more embarrassing? Sandor could be here, Sophie reminded him. Or my parents could have walked in. Dex groaned, and they both glanced at the door, needing to make sure they didn't have an audience. How long have you known I liked you? He asked, without looking at her. Honestly, I'm not sure. She'd spent so long pretending not to notice, it was hard to pin it down. But it might have also been part of the reason they'd been spending less time together. And why they mostly hung out in bigger groups. Dex buried his face in his hands. And you never felt... Actually, never mind. I don't want to know. Hey now, don't forget. Kissing me did nothing for you. She was trying her best not to let that sting. So, your head may be telling you one thing, but deep down, the rest of you wants something else. He didn't look convinced, and the silence that followed felt like it had eyes, staring at both of them, daring them to be the brave one, brave enough to end it. Sophie stepped up first. Thanks, by the way. For what? For caring about me like that. For thinking I'm special enough. He snorted. No, Dex, I mean it. I've never had anyone think about me that way. He snorted louder. She shook her head. You weren't there when I was growing up. You don't see how hated I was. Yeah, but that was around humans. Around here? What? He tilted his head. We both know I'm not the only one who... She held up her hand. Let's not go there. She could only stomach one brutally uncomfortable subject at a time. Especially since she was pretty sure she knew what he was going to say, and she had no idea if it was true. All I'm trying to say, she told Dex, is that I'm honored you thought of me that way, and your friendship seriously means everything. Please tell me this hasn't ruined that. He looked away again, fussing with the button he'd torn off. It's probably going to be weird for a while, so I guess it's good you want me to stay home and work on the caches. Her eyes and nose burned as she nodded. Just let me know when you're ready, and I'll give you space until then. I don't need space. I don't know what I need, he mumbled. The only thing Sophie could think of to say was, I'm sorry. Don't be, he told her. You could have been way meaner about this. You could have thrown the crush cuffs in my face. I would never do that, Dex. I do care about you. Just not... Yeah. He went back to fiddling with the torn-off button. I promise I'll find something else to use for the replacements. I don't know what I was thinking. Hey, you had some pretty solid points about the camouflage, Sophie reminded him. Yeah, but I think deep down part of me wanted to know if you'd be willing to wear them. Which was stupid. You already have tons of stuff to worry about with your human family and going to Ravagog tomorrow. You didn't need this. It's just been a giant maybe in the back of my mind for so long that when I thought I had found a sneaky way to finally get an answer, I couldn't resist. How long have you had the cuffs? Sophie had to ask. He ducked his chin to hide his face. I got them for you for the midterm. And then I went out and gave you your iPod instead. Wait, you ordered these when we were level 2s? That was more than a year ago. Pathetic, right? Sophie shook her head. Very, very sweet. You don't have to say that. But I mean it. And if you don't believe me, think about this. You're my first kiss. A slow smile spread across his lips, and he sat up a little taller. You're my first kiss, too. Sophie grinned back at him. See, we'll always have that, and I couldn't think of a better person to share that memory with. She hadn't expected the words to feel true, but they really did. It felt like she was standing on the edge of a terrifying sea of new, and who better to dip her toe in than a friend? The next time you kiss someone, she added quietly, it's going to be perfect, and I'm going to want to hear all about it. Am I a jerk if I admit that I do not want to hear about your next kiss? Sophie laughed. No, I think that's fair, but don't worry, it won't be happening for a long time. Sure it won't. She could argue, but it was probably better to let that conversation die. Well, Dex said, scruffing his fingers through his hair until he looked like he'd just been wandering through a tornado. It's been a strange day. First Forkel's back, now this. Yeah, definitely not the way I expected it to go, Sophie admitted. And tomorrow's going to be a whole lot more complicated. Ugh, I just realized you'll be hanging around Keith. How long do you think it's going to take him to drag the story out of you? Sophie groaned. Keith was going to slay her over this, and there was no way she'd be able to hide it. Her emotions were way too strong. Maybe you shouldn't wear the cuffs, Dex suggested. She shook her head. It'll be fine. It's way more important to protect the ability. I can handle Keith. Or, if he gets too annoying, I'll throw him into the river. Dex cracked half a smile, but it faded pretty quickly. How are you going to tell him? It depends how much he guesses. This is Keith. He's going to guess everything. Probably, Sophie agreed, silently cursing all empaths. And he'll tell everyone, Dex added through a sigh. Not if you don't want him to, Sophie promised. I know Keith is the master of teasing, but he's your friend too. If I tell him to keep it quiet, he will. Let's hope. Does that mean you don't want the rest of our friends knowing? I don't know. What am I supposed to say? Hey guys, pretty sure you all knew that I used to like Sophie, but she shot me down, so let's move on, okay? The used to hurt way more than Sophie had expected. So did the shot me down. You don't have to tell them anything you don't want to, she promised. But, if it would help, you're welcome to tell them I got all weak in the knees after we kissed. It's technically true. His dimples made a slight appearance, but faded just as fast. It's going to be so humiliating. She couldn't blame him for feeling that way. After all, wasn't that why she'd put off confessing her crush to Fitz? Her insides tangled when she remembered the promise she'd made to finally come clean. What had she been thinking? Maybe she could figure out a different confession, or avoid any form of cognate training indefinitely. I'm sorry, she told Fitz, feeling the need to say it again. It's not your fault. It wasn't. Either way, there was nothing either of them could do. She started to reach for his hand, then stopped herself. Dex noticed, but didn't say anything. Instead, he stood on his still shaky legs and pulled out his home crystal. Guess I'll see you later. Sophie nodded. Her heart felt like it was dropping out as he held the crystal up to the light. But before he leaped away, he turned and asked, Still best friends, right? A soft smile curled her lips, and her heart pulled back into place. Forever. That concludes chapter 27. I'll see you tomorrow for 28 and 29. Bye!